Sambatskunu Mongolia, and welcome to MNC Television's Allisоны Zochin. Today I bring you a very dear man, a gregarious friend of mine, one of Mongolia's most highly regarded guides, and just a very interesting fellow. Ишбалжир Batulik, thank you for joining us today.
Sambeno.
Sambeno.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you very much for coming. I'm sorry we started a bit late today, but you are, I'm very glad you
Well, in
could
Mongolia,
come.
there is nobody's late, only those who are early. So.
That's right. Exactly. Hey, Ишбалжир, I always call you Ishe, right? And we had just an interesting chat before the camera started. Just please, for our audiences, would you tell them how your name came about, Ишбалжир?
Well, it's a Tibetan name, and it was given by a monk when I was born. My grandmother went to consult a monk when I was born, and that monk actually is the one who hid himself in the cave to avoid an execution. And due to that, living in the cave for 10 years, day and night, summer and winter, he went blind. But he was a highly regarded man in the region who gave my name Ишбалжир, so it's a Tibetan name, and I'm called Ishe for short.
Well, Ishe, you know, not many people have a history like that to their names. Imagine being named by a lama who had spent 10 years in a cave. Very fascinating. Every time you open your mouth, you tell me something interesting, and I only have 30 minutes.
And I hated that name because it sounds so old-fashioned.
Really?
You know, Tibetan names usually regarded as an old-fashioned name, so I didn't like it.
But wait.
Until I learned the meaning.
You tell me the meaning.
Well, the meaning was glorious wisdom. There you go.
There you go.
Very hard name to live up to, but now I like it.
Yeah, it suits you, it suits you.
I don't know about that.
Hey, we met a couple of years ago at a TED Talk.
Yes.
And it was then that I learned about you and your really interesting background, your fascinating early childhood. I want you to tell viewers today a little bit about your childhood, growing up in Zavkhan Amek.
Yes, I was born in Zavkhan Amek, Western province. I think it's even among Mongolians, it's considered as one of the most beautiful places in Mongolia, which makes it effectively in the world, I believe. And well, people know Mount Otkontingir, highly respected spiritual mountain, and that's at the bottom of that holy mountain I was born and grown up.
You were born pretty much at the foot of Otkontingir.
Well, pretty close.
Wow.
And then in the summer times, I lived at the foothills of that mountain. And every time you take a little height next to the mountain, you have the presence of this really beautiful mountain. And not only the view, but there's something that makes you feel spiritual. So that every time, even if it's every day, when I see the mountain first time, I would get off my horse and then bow down to it or pray. So that was the respect. And also, you were not allowed to pee when the mountain is in presence due to the respect. So
you mean you couldn't relieve yourself turning to the mountain, but you could turn against the mountain?
Well, even turning, we just used to make sure that we are behind something, so that mountain is not in.
I had no idea. I had no idea.
Well, it's the respect that we develop by living around it for generations. And every morning, the first of the offerings would go to the mountain, to the sky.
You should tell me about your childhood growing up. Many Mongolians don't talk about their childhoods in the countryside. Tell me about who you lived with and what life was like.
Well, I'm one of 7, and I'm the second youngest in the family. But when my mom gave birth to me, she didn't have milk to feed me. So I was sent to my grandmother to be bottle fed.
Right. At what age?
Well, as soon as I was born, you know, she didn't have milk, so So I remember so I lived with her. And then my memories with her start when I was around 5 years old. One of the first one was my grandfather passed away. And it must have been something very, very big that I remember that, and then a couple of this and that. But most memories that I like to recall is the times that I spent with her in the countryside. She and I lived in the summertime during the school breaks with horses and yaks and sheep and the goats up in the Hanga mountain in a beautiful valley. So that is the most memorable times of my life when I recall it. And it's, I mean, I'm not going to lie. I mean, the herding life is tough.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's non-stop working.
Yeah, and that was you. You grew up as a young herder.
Yes, I mean, she and I lived together in the countryside. And when the school starts, I would come back to my real family and live with my mother and my siblings. But as soon as there is a summer break or school break, I would go back to the countryside. And to be honest with you, I didn't like it.
You did?
I didn't like it.
You didn't?
I didn't like it as a young man, you know, who wants entertainment and company and, you know, and...
but looking back on it.
But looking back on it, now that's one of the best times. That is, I believe that is the time that I was formed and shaped as who I am today.
Yeah.
And it's only thanks to my grandmother, because she was a very tough woman who had a tough life, but she had very straightforward ideas of what to do and not to do. And she was very straightforward.
I bet she was an amazing lady.
Yeah, she was well respected in the region. That people actually call her Janjin, meaning that the leader of the army, you know. And she can command anyone, you know, in her presence. She can be really tough. So that kind of.
She
lady.
sounds like she was a very good influence in your life. Ishe, at what age then did you go to UB, and what did moving to Ulaanbaatar later in life, how did that shape you, and what were your impressions of city life as a young guy coming to UB?
Well, I must have been 15, 16, and I vividly remember lying on my back out on a big mountain in Hanga Mountain, being bored, literally, and then two crows flew over my head. And I was going like, oh my God, at least they've got each other, you know, that kind of feeling. So I think that's one of the first times that I strongly decided I'm not going to be a herder anymore. And
because
go
you got
to the
lonely,
movies.
you got lonely.
You get lonely out there, and there are not many people, and then a lot of work you have to do and all those things. For young people, it's hard, I know that.
Yeah.
But anyhow, that's so I studied really hard to make sure that I entered the university, and then I came to Ulaanbaatar in 1996. And first I stayed with my uncle, and the first times in Ulaanbaatar was really tough on me. You know, somebody who has been born and grown up in Hanga Mountains in Zauchan, ending up in Ulaanbaatar. Even back then, 1996. One of the first difficulties were the room was so stuffy. It was late August, and it was so hot, and there were not much air, and then I had to go. That's my bathroom story.
This is the second bathroom.
Yes.
I want to get through 3 bathroom stories.
Then I had to go. So I asked, very uncomfortably, I asked, like, where's the bathroom? Where do I go? And they go like, oh, it's that door over there. And the first thing hit me was that it was in their house.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God. So anyway, for, you know, man's got to do what man's got to do. I went in there and I closed the door. And even then you can hear the people out there. That was so uncomfortable. The second thing was you had to be seated on something that I have never done in my life before. And And then I'm going like, oh my God, okay. And then there was water underneath me.
Which is a big no-no.
And for Mongolians, that's a taboo. You know, relieving yourself into a water, that's a real taboo. So anyway, the whole combination was so uncomfortable I couldn't go. So I guess I can say that I accumulated, and then when it was really desperate, I went to Gir Horodal, to my another uncles, and then used the outside pit latrine.
Yes, yes.
And yeah, that was...
Ishe, that's the funniest story. I just love it.
So when I started, you know, I'm a guide, right? So when I started guiding, in the beginning I couldn't understand why people would have a hard time, you know, using
going to the bathroom outside.
Exactly. But now I know that that, you know, somebody like me who has never used it, it was so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's the same, you know, with somebody who has.
See, I have a terrible time in the wilderness because I grew up, you know, always with access to a toilet, but I found numerous concoctions to aid me in my struggles. But I will show you some photos later.
And until my daughter grew up a little bit older, and then we went out camping and so on, and then I realized that she grew up using only a flush toilet.
Right, right.
And then she had this great dilemma with being out in the wilderness. So then it really hit me, like, there's a cultural difference, right? Yeah.
Of course. I don't think a lot of people realize that, and it's something that, the reason I want you to talk about it is because it's something people aren't aware of, and it's very humorous and very endearing and funny, and I just love that story. Yeah.
It's these little things that you don't really realize, but
that's right.
But it's a big deal, obviously, when it
comes
to somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, gosh. Hey, Ishe, before we talk about you and the Mongolian Professional Tour Guides Association, tell me a few of your favorite destinations within Mongolia. You've been guiding for 18 years. What would be your favorite destinations?
Yes, it's been 18 years now. Now, when I think back, I literally went around Mongolia all over the places repeatedly.
All the Amics.
All the Amics, all the popular tourist destinations, and so on. But the most that I like is now Gobi, really.
Gobi Altai.
No, well, Gobi in general, but
the whole Gobi area.
The whole Gobi area, but there is a specific part that I'm really falling in love recently, is the southwest, the Gobi Altai, the Hovd, and the southwest of Bainhongor.
Oh gosh, you know, but the Gobi Altai is the only Amig I haven't been to, and I had plans to meet you there last summer. You were guiding some Swiss people, I think.
Swedish.
Swedish?
Yes.
Why do you love that part of Mongolia so much? What is it about Gobi Altai?
Well, I grew up in Hanga Mountain, which is always green and flowers and lakes and rivers and, you know, trees, which is a definition of a beautiful nature by many Mongolians, and it's beautiful. But more I travel to the Gobi, there is something grand, something very generous, something colorful, the space, the whole thing, the wind, the whole thing is, there is something very, very attractive. And more I visit, more I'm falling in love with it.
Is it popular with tourists, the Gobi Altai? You don't...
Gobi is a popular destination, but not particularly that part that I'm going recently.
Right, right.
For instance, the Gobi has so many colors that I realized.
Within the rocks?
Within the rocks and the sediments, because it's exposed. In Hanga region or in Huskul, it's green, right? It's green here and green there. But in Gobi, you see all different sorts of colors, you know, from black to white, pink to green, blue to, you know, whatever the color you name it, it's got it there. So that's really something that I'm being very attracted in recent years. So I was going there with the Swedish group for a snow leopard expedition.
Did you see any snow leopards?
Which actually we managed to see 2 snow leopards on 3 occasions. So it was a very successful trip, yes.
Oh, how wonderful.
And it's an incredible sight to see such an elusive animal, powerful and very proud, you know, elegant animal in their natural habitat was something that embedded in my mind. I think I'm going to remember that forever. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Ishe, how is it that you learned English? There are many Mongolians who guide and don't speak English. It's a little bit tricky. I went to Bayanogi with a guide who spoke no English, and it's a little bit tricky. Are you self-taught?
I studied at the university, but like any other student, I didn't really learn it there until the final year. All of a sudden, this thought hit me, like, now you're gonna graduate, and what am I gonna do? And I studied museum and tourism, and I didn't really have.
Did you say music and tourism?
Museum.
Oh, museum.
Museum and tourism. Well, back then, to attract students, they combined tourism with everything. So it was very popular thing.
Physics and tourism.
But the main thing was museum that I learned later on. Anyway, I had very little interest to work in the museum, so the next choice was, of course, tourism. So I went to this company and then told them that I wanted to be a guide, and they said, your English is just totally broken. Unless you improve it, there's no way. So I started practicing 10 words. I memorized 10 words every day with 1 sentence. And I watched, listened, read, talked everything in English. And then after 3 months I graduated, I went back to the same company and they said, oh, it's much better.
Wow.
And since then, that's 2000,
Amazing.
I've been guiding.
Ishena, tell me all about an organization which you helped to found, and you are now the executive director of the Mongolian Professional Tour Guides Association, something that is so important and something that you are heavily involved in. You were out at Tadej last week training people. Tell me all about the formation of that NGO.
Well, in 2002, they were USAID funded project. To train the trainers for guides in Mongolia. So I was selected as one of the 16 to be trained as a trainer, and then out of the 16, 2 of us, me and my colleague, were invited to a conference in Scotland. And the conference was World Federation of Tour Guide Associations conference. So it's basically a roof organization. And then we attended the conference, we came back, and we got together all those 16 trainers, and then we decided to establish Mongolian Tour Guide Association. And the main idea was that back then, anybody who spoke a second language would act as a guide.
Right.
And from that training and from that convention, we learned that there is a lot more that you need. Language is just one of the assets you need. You need to have a broad knowledge, that's for sure. And then there was something missing, and it was guiding skills, which is very, very important component to be a professional good guide. So we aimed for this purpose to deliver these skills to the guides. And we have been conducting courses for the last 15 years.
Wow.
And this year, something very nice happened. We applied for another fund from EDP. It's a World Bank funded project, export development project. And then with the fund, we managed to invite trainers from WFDGA, that world organization again. And then they are training another 12 trainees. At this very moment, the training is going on now. When they graduate, there's going to be 12 more trainers that will enhance our association. So our aim is to make the guides in Mongolia more professional, not just somebody who has a summer break and wants to make a little bit extra money, you know.
Exactly. We were talking before the interview. You were in Tyrell last week. I saw a video of you just training people how to train people on horses, and I've said I've fallen off numerous times, and I've never had a training from a guide other than be careful. I mean, for example, how do you train guides to train people to be careful? How do you do it?
Well, it was I think you're referring to the safety instruction video we gave to the trainees in Tyrell. We went out field training on the weekend, and part of it was giving a training on how to give safety instruction to your clients, which is very important because it's one of the most risky activities that tourists do when they are in Mongolia.
Camels and horses.
Camels and horses, more with the horses because they are quicker, and giving a proper instruction helps you to avoid so many nasty disasters that can happen if you didn't give that. So we emphasize on how important to give an instruction, and then we demonstrate how do you actually deliver that.
Right.
So that starts with the preparation, what clothes, what safety measures, and how to approach a horse, how to get on, how to stay, how to go, how to get off, from A to Z. We go through everything. And this eliminates so many nasty accidents that can happen in the future.
You know, it's so important. It's only in the last few years that I've lived here that I actually have come across helmets for people. I mean, I think things are definitely improving and changing, but with your initiative, it makes it safer for people like me who are horrible on horses. Ishe, can I ask you, in your experience, what are some of the more unusual experiences you've had with foreigners in Mongolia as a guide in your last 18 years?
I can tell you in general that Mongolia, like you said, Mongolia is not a popular destination for mass tourism. It's a very special destination that people see a very special things and do special things in this country. So there are sometimes people would come with very little preparation and understanding that creates some issues.
I can imagine.
But I've had a lady who would walk into a lake shore, and then she would just keep walking until she's completely stuck up to her knee, and only then she stops and turns back and say, "Help!" And when I pulled her out and was helping to clean up and wash the mud off, she would say, "Why didn't you tell me there was a mud?" But I mean, that particular lady was very cute in a way that I couldn't be mad or anything. I remember just laughing so hard I fell on the floor, and that made the other fellow members in the group very angry at her.
Hey, Ishe, how do people get in contact with you if they want to find out more about the Professional Guides Association or contact you regarding a tour? Do you have your own tour company?
I have my own tour company, but this time I would like to give Mongolian Professional Tour Guide Association contact, which is www.mptga.org.
Okay. Thank you. We'll get that up on the screen.
From that website, you can get information about how to train your guides to a professional level. Because after all, the guides are the ones who are doing the most of the job. You know, when a travel company is trying so hard to sell their trip to Mongolia, finally they bring a group of tourists, and it's up to the guide who, either make it nightmare or a tremendous adventure.
Absolutely.
Especially in a country like Mongolia.
Yeah. Hey, Isham, my last final question for the day, I would love to chat to you for ages. What is the thing that foreigners find most wonderful about Mongolia when they come here? And their parting words, what makes Mongolia different from other travel destinations?
it may sound cliche, but definitely a beautiful nature that is untouched. There is something that, you know, you come to this vast open expanse and realize that this hasn't been touched, you know, for God knows how many thousands and thousands of years. But that's part of it. That's what they expect to enjoy when they come, I think.
Exactly.
Mostly.
They're expecting that.
But once they come, they do enjoy that part. And plus, when they meet local people, especially nomads and herders,
The Hodonihun.
Hudonihun and Malchan, and if they spend enough time and if the guide explains it enough and thoroughly, they end up really being admired of their simple life.
Yeah.
It's a simple life
Yes.
that modern world is losing touch of.
Yeah. Thank you. Isha, it's been lovely chatting to you today. You're a real, well, you're one of the most interesting people I've met in UB, with many stories.
Well,
we've only just touched the tip of the iceberg. So perhaps in the future you will come back on, and thank you for today.
We should go to Gobi Alta and then sit around fire and then talk while we look at the snow leopard.
That sounds all right. You're not, I'm there.
All right.
Isha, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, and that's all today, viewers, on Allison's Zochin. I hope to see you next Monday on the MNC network. But for now, Sakharam Rade.